Hi everyone, welcome back to Abigail's Bookshelf. I am turning 30 in a week. And while that fact is not very concerning to me, I was thinking, kind of reflecting back and thinking a lot about the books that I read over the course of my life that have made me this way, for better or for worse. And so I thought I would just do a little two-parter video. That's me reflecting on 30 books that are sort of bricks in the foundation of my selfhood. And so today we're going to start with books 1 through 13. And these are not ranked in any particular order. They are grouped by series. And each book in the series counts as an individual book because who has the time? Can you imagine if I did, that would be like 60 plus books if I did each book individually. Anyway, I did not do that because I value your time, I value my time, and most importantly, I value Amy the editor's time. So here are the 13 books that have made me this way. And they're grouped by age range. So this is kind of childhood to leaving college. So sort of adolescent through young adult years. And so these books have imprinted on me in a way that if I were to read them, if I had read them for the first time now, I don't know if all of them would have hit the same. But I am a big believer in people reading books exactly when they need them. And I also believe that some people are going to just connect with certain books because of where they were in their life at the time when they read them. And so when I was compiling this list, that was something I was thinking about a lot and reflecting on a lot as I was what was it about this book that was so important to me? So when I talk about these books, it's going to be based more on my experience with the book and less on the book's content or merit or whatever. So I'll give you a quick summary of kind of the gist of what the book is about if you aren't familiar with it. But this is mostly going to be this book happened to me at this time of my life, and this is without oversharing. Challenge level impossible for me. So yeah, that's gonna be that's what we're doing today. That's our setup. Let's get into it. I'm talking too much. Why am I talking so much? Now I have to think of an intro. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is Abigail's Bookshelf, where I will just do book reviews, and it won't be anything more complicated than that. The first set of books on our list, again, not ranked by any sort of order. As they occurred to me, this is the order they're in, and then I grouped them by series. So first set of books on the list, books 1 through 4 in our 30 for 30, is The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. I read these books for the first time when I was 16. And if I could find a picture of what my bedroom looked like, I think it probably looked like some sort of I would describe it as a Victorian spinster who was way too into birds would be exactly how I would describe my teenage bedroom. I was really into ravens and crows. And so the cover of The Raven Boys has a raven on it, and it's called The Raven Boys. And so I immediately was locked in. And at that time of my life, I was also really into groups of boys. I'm not into boys, but I liked groups of there's something about a group of boys doing things together, doing adventure and supernatural stuff together that I was so into. I still kind of am, but it's not something I seek out as much as I did when I was 16. And hey, psychoanalyze that in the comments if you want. I could not begin to scratch the surface on what the fuck that was about. But that's what I was into. The Covenant, the movie from I think it's 2006. It has Sebastian Stan and Taylor Kitsch and Stephen Strait in it. I love The Covenant. Oh my god. Okay, so The Raven Boys very much reminded me of that, which was my favorite movie at the time. And another favorite movie I just recently discovered then was The Lost Boys, Kiefer Sutherland vampire movie. Again, groups of boys into supernatural shit. So that's what I was into. That's what I was into. That's what I was thinking about. That's what I wanted to consume. And I found The Raven Boys. And hey, that exactly checked off all of those boxes. But perhaps in a slightly more age-appropriate manner. So while this kind of started with questionable intentions, it ended happily for everyone involved. I will say it ended happily for everyone involved. The Raven Cycle is hands down one of my favorite series of all time. It's craft-wise, I if I could write anything half as craft compelling as The Raven Boys, I would die happy. I think it's beautifully written. The characters are amazing. The story is fun. It's so original. It has the vibes, it has atmosphere, it has everything. It's funny. It's such a perfect series. And I still believe that to this day because it is a series that I still regularly will go back and read. I always want to read it in the spring, and then I always want to read it when I go to the beach. And so I have read it a few times since I was 16. The biggest reason why this series made this list is because I have found that every single time I reread it, I identify closely with a different character, which I can't say that that's ever happened to me in another series. And I think that speaks a lot to how well Maggie Stiefvater writes an ensemble cast, but also just like how well she does character. Like when I read it the first time, I was really into Blue. Blue is the only female main character because, hey, even in YA, you can only have one girl in a group. And I really identified with her because I wanted to be quirky. I wanted to be different. I was not like the other girls. Not for the reasons that I thought. I don't have magic powers. I was gay. But there you go. So I really identified very heavily with Blue when I read it when I was 16. Gansey remains the only man I believe deserves any rights. And that's a complicated statement, I know. If you've read the book, you're like, yes, correct. Because Gansey is the one that's allowed to get away with everything and anything ever. So first read through really was into Blue when I was like 15, 16. And then when I read it, I remember reading again when I was in college, and I identified very, very, very heavily with Adam Parrish. There's no foreshadowing there. Hey, that was not foreshadowing at all. I was having a hard time with my parents and my family life, and I was surrounded by, I went to a wealthy-ish college in a wealthy-ish area, and I was not wealthy, and so I was dealing a lot with sort of anxiety about money. I had a friend at the time that was much richer than I was, and so I was struggling a lot with that. And like Adam Parrish to me is class consciousness, hating your family, and just being pissed off all the time. And that was very much my energy when I was 20. And it's funny because I hated him in the first couple of read-throughs. I thought he was just so annoying and so entitled. And then I was like, no, he's right. No, actually, he's right. And he should say that louder. And then I read it again in like my late-ish 20s because I had never read the Dream Thieves book. The final Dream Thieves book was about to come out. Dream Thieves is a spin-off series based off the character of Ronan Lynch. And that series was I think the last book was just about to come out. And so I was like, well, I've never read them, so let me get into that. So I read The Raven Cycle again. And at that point in time, I heavily identified with Ronan Lynch. I was Ronan Lynch in such a way. And yeah, okay, so the Adam Parrish was foreshadowing because I did come out shortly after reading The Raven Cycle when I identified with Ronan Lynch. And so that's just, I think, one of the most beautiful things about that series for me, and why it's like continues to resonate with me, besides the fact that I think it's beautifully written and I think Maggie Stiefvater is a genius. The fact that I can read the series at different points in my life and understand different characters and identify more or less with different characters, I just think it makes such a fun reading experience. I don't reread books often. It really takes a special book for me to want to reread it, and The Raven Cycle is 100% one of those books that I will go back and reread again and again because I find something new every time, because it reveals something new to me about the world or myself, and that rocks. That rocks. And for me to have found that series at 16, I think was deeply important. So 10 out of 10, amazing book series, love it. That's books 1 through 4. The Raven Boys, The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and finally The Raven King, which came out when I was in college. And I got to go meet Maggie Stiefvater at my local bookstore, and it was amazing. And if I have a picture, I'll show it here. Please don't make fun of my hair. Okay. Next up, books 5 through 8. Again, no foreshadowing. I don't believe in foreshadowing. Books 5 through 8 are the Twilight Saga. And I'm cheating a little bit on this. I did say that I was counting a whole series to be the book, like to count on the list, but I'm also cheating because I did not read Midnight Sun Twilight Edwards version when I was a child, but I did read it as an adult, and it just has to, listen, it has to go on the list. So the first 3 books of the Twilight series, Twilight, New Moon, and Eclipse, hugely foundational book series for me. We do not talk about Breaking Dawn, because even when I was a teenager, I said, we're not doing pregnancy trope. Hey, this is all kind of messed up and weird. Let's pretend this never happened. I read it and I hated it. So the 4th spot on the Twilight series, despite the fact there are 5 books, I'm not counting Breaking Dawn, that doesn't count. It doesn't exist to me. Twilight Edwards version, Midnight Sun, is taking Breaking Dawn's spot because, wow, what a book. What a book. So I read Twilight for the first time when I was 10 years old. I convinced my mom to buy it for me at the Scholastic Book Fair when I was in the 5th grade. And she did. And she had to read it first to make sure it was age appropriate. At the time, we as a culture, and especially we as Southern Baptists living in south of Atlanta, were not aware that Mormons existed or what they were about. So, she could have just been like, oh, it's a Mormon, it's probably fine. But she was not aware of what Mormons were at the time. So the cultural consciousness around Mormons was really low at the time, really brought to light by Twilight, I would say. So she read the book before me, and then she let me read it. And let me tell you what, I had been reading a lot of vampire books at the time, but this is the one that's really had some staying power. I loved Twilight. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I was taking notes. I was highlighting. I was writing shit in the margins. My mom pre-ordered every single book that came after. For me, I had them all in hardcover. I traveled. My mom and my grandma took me several hours to go to a Stephenie Meyer event at a Barnes & Noble. The line in that place, completely against fire code, but everybody was wearing their Twilight merch. It was such a time. I really can't explain to you guys what it was like to be in Twilight Mania in 2010. 2005 to 2010 was I was in middle school. It was changing things for me. I was very staunchly Team Edward. And the thing about that is, and I'm also going to talk about this when we get to the next series on the list, but when I was a kid reading love triangles, I was not rooting for the man I wanted to be with. That's not foreshadowing. I was rooting for the man that I thought best suited the woman. And so I thought Edward was who Bella should be with. And so I was Team Edward. I thought Jacob was a horror, he was a kind of a fun character. And until Midnight Sun came out, I probably would have argued that Jacob was a more interesting character than Edward, because Edward was so straight-laced and uptight, and Jacob was fun and he was silly. So yeah, loved. I went to all the movies. I had so much merch. I had posters on my wall. I had the whole thing. I was obsessed. I had a Twilight birthday cake one year. I was very, very, very deeply into Twilight, and it made me who I am. It made me a reader. I think as I was growing up, that was one thing that me and my mom really bonded over. She was also a big reader, but she liked more paranormal romance, Anita Blake, J.R. Ward, that kind of stuff. True Blood. She liked True Blood. And I didn't start reading those until I was a teenager, but we bonded a lot over those books and reading them together and talking about them together. And so that was another thing that was kind of really foundational for me at that time in my life. And I'm going to say something vulnerable to you guys. I did, in fact, make Twilight fancast videos and post them on YouTube. I did do that. I made a lot of them. And to be honest, I do not recall who I wanted to play Edward or Bella. I just deeply remember how around that same time, what was that superhero movie that came out? Oh, when they were superhero movie. Was I just speaking in tongues? Oh, Sky High. Sky High came out. Sky High came out around the Twilight craze. And let me tell you what, Stephen Strait in that movie, that was Jacob Black to me. I still, to this day, I don't care if he would have been too old. I think Stephen Strait would have ate down Jacob Black. And I love him. I still, to this day, I love Stephen Strait. I have such respect for him as an actor. But if he would have played Jacob Black, guys, it would have been over for you. It would have been over for you. But big congrats to Taylor Lautner. Hey, that's one. There's a couple of good things that came out of the Twilight craze. I think Taylor Lautner was one of them. The way that Robert Pattinson acted about Twilight, another wonderful, wonderful thing. And then, of course, the rumors that Kristen Stewart and Nikki Reed dated on set. Girl, that time, we'll never have it back. We'll never have it back. We can only look fondly in memory and just appreciate that we had it at all, you know? So yeah, 10 out of 10. Love, 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 love Twilight Down. And yeah, there's problematic shit in there, sure. I do not continually still engage with Twilight stuff. I don't engage with Stephenie Meyer. I watch the movies, but that's pretty much it. I haven't read the books in years, but I did read Midnight Sun. My grandmother bought me a copy of Midnight Sun. She sent it to my house. I did not ask her to do that. She just remembered how much I love Twilight. She sent it to me. And let me tell you what, I think that book is the best thing that ever happened to the Twilight franchise. And I know how bold of a statement that is, because I feel that if my conspiracy theory is Robert Pattinson ghost wrote that book, that is my theory, because that Edward Cullen is who Robert Pattinson believed Edward Cullen. That's who Robert Pattinson played in those movies. And I think that book is so unhinged. It's so mentally ill. I love it. I need to do like a full like takedown review on it, because there's some stuff in there that I still to this day think about and I giggle about it. It's beautiful. Love it. 10 out of 10. Love Twilight. I loved Midnight Sun. I will be going to see them when they release them again at theaters. I will be doing that, and I will listen to the album again and again this autumn. But I did hear there's a rumor that the Jacob Renesmee book is coming one day. So, hey girls, if you're holding on for that, good luck to you, more power to you. It's not for me, and I will not be reading it. Thank you. So now, next series on the list, books 10 through 11, is The Hunger Games. Guys, of course it was The Hunger Games. These books got really popular when I was just entering high school. I think I was maybe like 8th or 9th grade. And these books were starting to like enter cultural consciousness in a way that, to that point, like it was filling the void left by Twilight. And a lot of things tried to come up and like fill this spot, but nothing was hitting like that. And then finally The Hunger Games happened, and Suzanne Collins wrote The Hunger Games. She was touched with divine inspiration and wrote one of the most important political manifestos of our age. I really wish some of you guys would have paid a little bit more attention. I wish some of you guys would have paid a little bit more attention to what Miss Collins was telling us, because I think you guys lost plot a little bit in some places. So The Hunger Games, how do you not know what The Hunger Games is about? I didn't even try to tell you what Twilight was about, because I think you know what Twilight's about. And if you don't, thoughts and prayers. Hunger Games really kicked off the dystopian teen craze of the 2010s, and no one was doing it. No one was doing it like Katniss. Listen, I tried Divergent. I read one book, hated it. Nothing was hitting like this was hitting. In the vampire era, I was reading other vampire books that I liked and that I wish would have survived in the way that Twilight did. I read a lot of dystopian books during the Hunger Games phase. None of them were hitting. None of them were hitting like this one was. I read the books when I was probably 15. I think I was in the 10th, maybe I was like 9th, 10th grade. And these books were like being passed around my school. I do not recall a book ever like being in teen awareness so visibly. Like, you know, there were online spaces were kind of emerging at this time. But the fact that this book was like being passed around my chemistry class, like in the 10th grade, was like I'd never seen that before. A lot of kids my age like mocked Twilight, but they were down for the Hunger Games. Some of them, again, missed the message, but they read a book. So I read this book for the first time on a flight to Vegas. First and only time I ever went to Vegas. I will never go back. I was 15. I was flying with my cousin and my grandparents to celebrate my cousin's 16th birthday at Las Vegas because she wanted to see Chris Angel. I wanted to see the Hoover Dam. So anyway, we did that. Don't ask me how Chris Angel was. You know how it was. So yeah, these books were kind of going around at the time. Just so great. Another thing that I really kind of enjoyed about like reflecting on this book series was like the way that this carried kind of into my college years, because the movies were still coming out when I was in college. And my first year in college, I took a class called The Hunger Games and the Roman Spectacle. I still remember Dr. Drinkwater. I remember the exact title of that course. I loved that course. Yes, I did get put on talking probation. Loved The Hunger Games. The movies were coming out at that time. I remember going to the theaters when I was in college to see the movies with my friends and just like sobbing through them because they were so beautiful. And to this day, I don't think a book was so perfectly adapted as the Hunger Games books were, especially Catching Fire. Catching Fire, you could almost like beat by beat read in the theater and like see it happening on the screen. And I think that a lot of that comes from the way the Hunger Games was written and its style, like that first person, present, immediate, one character. And so it's very action heavy. And so you can get that. And love Katniss Everdeen to this day. I'm like, need her bad. And going back to my comment from earlier about the love triangles, I liked Gale. Sorry. I thought he was very interesting. I thought he was a compelling character. I like messed up characters. I do like messed up characters. I think you guys have probably picked up on that by now. I know there's that like beautiful Ursula Le Guin quote about evil being mundane and only the good being interesting, but I'm gonna disagree with her on that because I think people who are messed up are way more interesting. And that's how I was feeling about Gale. I did not want him anywhere near me. I did not want him anywhere near my sister. And I thought Peeta was kind of boring. Sorry, stand by it. I think that like the Hunger Games is like what all YA should aspire to be. Stop comparing stuff to the Hunger Games. Stop saying that. If I have to watch one more, I read XY book that was compared to the Hunger Games, so you didn't have to, video on YouTube, and the fact that they're only comparing it to Hunger Games because it's like kind of dystopian or has a love triangle, I'm gonna do something that we're all gonna regret. And I mean that. Last set of books. This is not a series. These are two separate books, but I'm talking about them together because they are the books that I think of when I think of my college years. It's two books that I read for the first time in college, and just that it's why I am this way. It's exactly everything about it is like, yeah, I think that makes sense for you as a person. So the first one is Frankenstein. God, where to start? That book was a liberation for me at that time of my life. Like I said, in college, I was going through some family issues and really struggling with becoming independent from my family and especially my parents. And I think like regardless of like the trauma I went through, I think that's something a lot of people in college kind of deal with. And so I always hate when people are like, oh, I read it in high school. And I'm like, there's no way for you to understand Frankenstein when you're in high school. First of all, it's a very dense book. It's very, like, the vocabulary is dense. The style of writing is very specific and very dense. And the themes are very heavy and dense. And you need a sort of like lived experience awareness and also a lot more literary experience under your belt to understand what's going on in that book. And so I hate when high school English teachers assign that book. Like, girl, that's not for them. It's not for them. They can't understand it. So Frankenstein, like, I read it for the first time and literally I remember like just sitting in my bed, like just staring at the wall and just being like, oh my God. Like it felt like listening to a Hosier song. And by that, I mean, I felt like Mary Shelley had somehow gone into the ventricles of my heart and written down what she found painted on the walls in there. And that was a very beautiful and horrifying experience because there's like part of this where it's like, I've never had a unique thought in my life, right? Like everything we've experienced as people, somebody else probably has also experienced. And if you're lucky enough to find a piece of literature or a piece of art that reflects that experience and makes you feel less alone in that, it's so beautiful. And so it's kind of like that double-edged sword of being 20 and thinking like, I'm a unique person, I'm special. And then also being comforted by the fact that everything you've been through, somebody else has already been through. Like there's nothing that you're experiencing in the scale of human life that somebody else has not also experienced. And so to read that book at that time in my life was just really crucial. And it started me down the path of like romanticism and the Gothic, which is what I studied in college. My first year, I took a class called Romanticism in Britain. And the whole reason I took the course is because it was a travel element. So after the course in the summer, we would take 3 weeks and go to England and like go to all of these authors' houses and go to all these literary spots. And at that time in my life, I wanted nothing more than to go to England. Like I wanted it so bad. I dreamed about it my whole life. I wanted to go. Here was this perfect opportunity, and it was a lit class. All I had to do was read some old books. Girl, I'm there. But at that time in my life, probably the closest thing I'd read from that era would have been like Jane Austen, right? And she's not really a romantic. She's Regency. So I get assigned Mary Shelley as like the author that I'm going to present on when we go to England. And so I read Frankenstein. Changed my life. I loved that course. That whole course changed my life. Reading that book was the singular most important thing that could have happened to me at that time of my life. And I stand by that. So we went to England, and we went to the St. Pancras Church, where Mary Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, who was a huge like feminist thinker, was originally buried. She's no longer buried there, but her tombstone is still there. And so I stood there and gave everyone my presentation on how much I love Frankenstein, and it was so beautiful. And then we went to Dove Cottage, which is a William Wordsworth house up in the Lake District. And I got to hold and read from a first edition Frankenstein. Cried like a baby. Guys, I'm so emotional. I'm such an emotional person. It was beautiful. And that book remains to be like one of the most important pieces of literature that I have. And it's just, I love it. I love it. I think it's brilliant. And I don't care if you don't like it. So the last book on the list is, funnily enough, was a book that I read in a course that was by the same instructor as the Romantic Britain. Dr. Quadra could not get rid of me. He could not get rid of me. I took Romanticism in Britain with the travel. I took Romanticism again, which was like a more in-depth course about Romanticism in general. And then I took his Gothic course, and that's where I read this book. He changed my life. Thank you, Dr. Quadra. You rock. Amazing thinker, and really pushed me a lot in college. So mad respect to you, even though you did hurt my feelings with that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde presentation comment. However, you were right. And I think about that all the time. And every time I'm like, am I doing something kind of subpar? I'm like, Dr. Quadra, I think this was subpar. And I try harder. So thank you, Dr. Quadra. Another tangent that no one has to go on. Last book. Number 13. Oh, that's fitting. Okay, number 13. I read this in a Gothic literature course. Wow. The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Guys, I love this book. It is so... good is not a strong enough word, and I can't think of any strong... it is an amazing piece of literature. It's sort of like a haunted house psychological thriller. I feel like Shirley Jackson writes like she writes in a world that I would be scared to go in, but I want to know everything about it. And it never feels like reality. It almost feels like a half step over from reality. It's kind of Twilight Zone vibes where you're like, this world looks like my world, but something's wrong here. Again, it was a book that like, it came to me at a very specific time in my life when I was like going through things. I was the most depressed I had been to that point of my life. Not the most depressed I would ever be, foreshadowing, but definitely the most depressed I'd been at that point in my life. I was under tremendous stress, and I was struggling a lot with expectations that were being placed on me, both like from my family, like from my family environment, but also like just being a 20-something and a very early 20-something. I was probably 21 at the time, and dealing a lot with like all of the expectations of the world, right? Like there's so many things that you think you're supposed to be doing. There's so many things that you feel like you're failing at, and you just don't know like which direction to look. And I feel like this book very much centered that experience for me. The character of Eleanor, like, she just, like, I was relating way too well with her. I was reading the book like, yes, she's so right, she's so right, she's right. Got to the end, I said, uh-oh. The character of Theodora, oh, beautiful. And I will say, like, this is one of the scariest books I've ever read. There was one part in particular. I was sitting in the hallway waiting for a different class to start. I was just reading in a crowded hallway, like perfectly in daylight, in public, like nothing, no gothic vibes at all. But I was reading this one particular part and I read this one line and it scared me so bad. To this day, I don't think I've ever gotten so scared reading a book. Like, somebody opened a door and I jumped out of my skin. Like, it was so, oh, it was so creepy and scary. Love it. Love it. I think it's a masterclass of Gothic literature. If you're looking to get into the Gothic, I would recommend starting there because that kind of gets you into sort of the biggest elements of Gothic, the sort of taboo and the sort of like subliminal and how like, is it real? Is it not real? Is it like, am I imagining this? Is it real? Like just this sort of like distortion of reality and distortion of like belief. And it's just such an impeccable book. I have the first page of this book printed out and put on my wall because I think it's exquisite. I can recite it from memory, almost exactly the first sentence. I haven't done it in a while, so if I get it wrong, no, I didn't. The book was printed wrong. No live organism can continue to exist for long under conditions of absolute reality. Even the larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane. Hello? I think that opening paragraph is one of the best written paragraphs in the world. No live organism can continue to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed, by some, to dream. Oh, the way she uses commas. Guys, I dream about it. Hill House, not sane. Beautiful. Oh God, it's so beautiful. And I think that's one of the best books of all time. I think it's genius. Really foundational to who I am as a person. So, I think one of maybe the sort of connecting features of these books is just a freak of a girl. There's a girl and she's a freak. And I mean girl gender neutrally. I always usually mean girl gender neutrally. Eleanor, freak of a girl. Freak of a girl. Blue Sergeant, freak of a girl. Bella Swan, freak of a girl. Katniss Everdeen, freak of a girl. Guys, she was a freak of a girl. And I just think that the creature in the Frankenstein is the most freak of a girl. And so that was like what as I was kind of writing up my descriptions of these books and like thinking about what they meant to me, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking, what brings all of these together? And the answer is there is a freak of a girl. And I was a freak of a girl, obviously. I still am to a lot of extent. And so I think that all of these books very clearly indicate what kind of freak of a girl I was when I was growing up and what made me the freak of the girl that I am now. For so much of my childhood, I felt consistently on the outside of things. I felt like people had information that I didn't have. I feel like I was missing a page in my syllabus. And I struggled a lot with trying to make it look like I was not missing things and trying to put on this sort of facade of normalcy and of knowing what I was doing and being confident and being everything that I felt like everybody expected me to be all of the time. And obviously now that I'm 30, I can look back and be like, girl, you were in prison. But I did not have the skills or the abilities to kind of deal with the stuff that I needed to. I couldn't process those things in so many words. So with all of that said, I feel like a lot of these books, they were like little messages to me from the universe that I was not doing anything wrong, that what I was feeling was okay, that there was a way out, that there, were pieces of information that I didn't have yet, but they were also pieces of information that most people didn't have around me. And so these books brought me really a lot of comfort. Of course, they were like very much an escape for me growing up when I was feeling isolated and different and strange. But they also made me feel more like even though I felt like I was strange, I could still be the main character, and I still had a story that was worth telling, and I still was in the middle of the book. I was nowhere. I think when I was a teenager, I struggled a lot with feeling like, and especially in college, I felt like I should know what I'm doing now. I should have this figured out by now. Which is, like, in retrospect, being 30 and being like, I don't fucking know, is crazy for me to think that I should have had anything figured out at 20. I'm still figuring things out to this day. I figured out something yesterday. So, and I imagine I will figure out something tomorrow. And I think that these books were really good at helping me kind of understand that and feel more comfortable with that in a kind of subliminal way. So here's to all the freak of a girls. Girl, you're a freak and it's okay. So just keep being freaky. Part 2 coming soon. I'll talk about my adult books. We're gonna get even more freak of a girl. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you're not yet 30, hey girl, keep going. The story is not finished and you can't imagine what's going in the next chapter. And if you're 30 or older, hey, I'm in your club now. Please be nice to me. I'm a freak of a girl. Hey, if you're feeling like a freak of a girl, I want you to get in my comments and tell me what books you were reading.